All right, this is the League Championship Series predictions for 2025. So in the ALCS, we have a matchup between the 2-seed Seattle Mariners and the 1-seed Toronto Blue Jays. This is an interesting historical type of matchup because of you have both teams. It's the battle of the 1977 MLB expansion teams, the two teams that came into the league in 1977, and one of them has 2 World Series titles. The Blue Jays won back-to-back in the 1990s, 92 and 93, and the Seattle Mariners have never been to a World Series. And so this ALCS starts tonight at 8:03 p.m. in Toronto. And in this series, the Mariners have the better rotation, the more reliable closer, and they have a greater knack for hitting the ball out of the park than Toronto does. But it's the Blue Jays who come into this thing more on fire with a home field advantage, with Trey Yesavage. I think it's going to be huge in this series. Has yet to allow a home run in like 20 innings of work so far. So he's going to keep the Mariners' big bats in the yard as much as possible. And I think he's slated to be the starter for games 2 and 6. That's Trey Yesavage and Yesavage, however you say his name. And I believe that also the carryover from the 5-game series for the Mariners, not as much rest than the Blue Jays. And we're going to see the Blue Jays haven't been to an ALCS since 2016 when they lost to the Johns Indians. Mariners haven't been since 2001. So they lost to Road 2's Yankees. All right, and in this one, it's going to be we're going to see a World Series in Canada for the first time in over 3 decades. So I got the Blue Jays winning this one. I'll say 6 games. So we're going to close it out in Toronto. Okay. And then in the NLCS, we have the 3-seed Los Angeles Dodgers going for a repeat, having been here in the NLCS, of course, last year, 2024. Brewers making their first return to the NLCS since 2018 when they lost to the Dodgers that year. All right, so the big narrative here is that the Brewers were 6-0 against the Dodgers in the regular season. The Dodgers, though, have been more on fire and have just gotten things together after kind of sleepwalking through part of the season. I believe that success in October is more about getting hot at the right time. The Dodgers have become a freight train. We expect them to be we expect them to be, back in April. And they've won 14 of 17. That's big, and they don't allow many runs. Milwaukee is kind of average going back to August 31st. They're like 15 and 15. So also that carryover from that long series against the Cubbies, and that rotation's a little out of whack. Not as out of whack as the Mariners rotation. That's a big factor in the ALCS with them in their pitching, using all those starters in the all those those pitchers in the game against Detroit, burning some arms there. So it's going to kind of mess them up a little bit for tonight's game. But on the Dodgers and Brewers series, I feel like the Dodgers seem to have their lack of reliable closer issue kind of sorted out, and they're really piggybacking those starters to keep the some of those problematic relievers out of high leverage situations, and it's going to be really hard to take them out in this series. I like their 4-man rotation is so much more deep than the Brewers rotation. That's going to be the big difference in this, and just the way they're able to get runs lately. They've been so much more hot than the Brewers, so I'm going to have to go. And then plus the Dodgers were my choice back in March to win the National League pennant. So I'm going to go with the Dodgers here in 5 over the Brewers, and it's going to be a blue World Series, a Buell World Series. It's going to be Sharks, Blue Jays against Bolts' Dodgers. Best teams going right now in Major League Baseball. That's going to be your World Series. So the weird World Series, little weird side note history here is if the reverse happened, you had Brewers versus Mariners, that would be a weird World Series, not just because of it would screw up the Fox ratings, and not just because they are two teams that have they've been to one World Series, but 1982, very little World Series experience for both teams, none from the Mariners, just one time for the Brewers. But that would be an interesting matchup. I don't know if this history would be talked about if it happened, but back in 1970 or 69, I think it was, you had the expansion team named the Seattle Pilots that came into the league, and they were only there for one season before they moved to Milwaukee and became the Milwaukee Brewers, and then 7 years later, the Seattle got another expansion team, the Mariners. These two teams are connected in a strange way. But enough of that. It's going to be the Blue Jays versus the Dodgers. Blue Jays making their first trip to the World Series since 1993. I just had this vision of seeing the Game 3, I think, or Game 1, whatever it be. Probably be home field for the Blue Jays, but whichever the first game is in Toronto, seeing like Cito Gaston and I could see like Robbie Alomar and some of those players from the, maybe even probably have to have Joe Carter throw out the first pitch. And sadly, no Ricky, but I don't know. I just had this thought of seeing some of those guys, and no Tony Fernandez. May he also rest in peace. But I just kind of saw like a vision of them coming out, kind of honoring them before the game, and I just feel like it's going to be the Blue Jays. And of course, when it goes to LA, you'll see good old Sandy in the stands, him and Rob Lowe. All right, guys. That's my picks for the NLCS, ALCS. Enjoy the ALCS Game 1 tonight. On Fox, I guess.